Hey friends! My name is Desiree, aka Mama Friendly, and I do all sorts of videos on my channel, from cooking videos to planner videos, vlogs, hauls, homeschool videos with a Disney twist, a little bit of everything. So if any of these things sound like fun to you, I hope that you'll subscribe and join me on my YouTube adventure. If you're a new friend, welcome. And if you're an old friend, welcome back. If you are an old friend, then you are already familiar because I talk about it all the time. But I'm Cuban, I'm first generation American living in South Florida, and I do a lot of cooking on my channel. But I realized in the last few months that I have such a huge repertoire of authentic, traditional, delicious recipes that I could be sharing with you guys. And I really feel like I don't tap into that often enough. So I am making it my mission this year, at least once a month, to share with you guys a Cuban recipe. Every once in a while, I might sneak in maybe a Dominican recipe because my husband is Dominican and they have some really delicious food too. But this month, I wanted to share a recipe with you guys that is not precisely exactly authentic, but only because I adapted it to make it gluten and dairy free. That's the other thing you might not know about me, is that I've been eating gluten and dairy free exclusively for about 6-7 years now. And so there are some foods that I really love, but I haven't been able to enjoy in a while because of the way that they're prepared. This particular recipe was a super easy fix because I didn't have to do anything like really out there to make it work for my lifestyle. I just had to do like a switch out of ingredients so that instead of using flour, I'm using gluten-free flour. Instead of using breadcrumbs, I'm using gluten-free breadcrumbs. So it was a pretty direct adaptation. But in case you haven't looked at the title yet, what I'm going to show you how to make today is Papa Rellena. If you're not familiar with that, I'm going to post a picture of a regular one up here, like a traditional one. But Papa Rellena is kind of like, it's a snack, I guess, but it could also be like a handheld lunch. At its essence, it's ground beef, but picadillo. So it's not just ground beef, it's like zhuzhed up special ground beef that's inside a ball of mashed potatoes that's then breaded and deep fried. Super filling, really delicious. I mean, you can't go wrong with ground beef and potatoes, but the way that this is held together is just, oh, it's so good. And I haven't been able to have it in a long time because of the breading, etc. And then like, you might, I guess, depending on who makes it, because that's the other thing, is that these authentic traditional recipes, every family has their own way of doing it. It's slightly different for each, person. And down here in South Florida, we have ventanitas, right? So you can just walk up to a window of any cafeteria and order them, and everybody kind of has their way. So it might even have dairy in it, depending on how somebody prepares the potatoes. But that was an easy fix for me. I just used dairy-free butter, no milk, and it worked out, which is good because you need the potatoes to be a little stiff anyways to hold their shape. Anyway, I'm jumping the gun. This recipe was absolutely delicious. I'm really excited to show it to you. So let's go ahead and show you how I made these gluten-free and dairy-free papas rellenas. We're gonna begin by making the picadillo for the filling. This is something, as I mentioned, every family, every person has such an individual way of doing this. So this is not necessarily the correct way, but it's the way that I'm going to do it. I have a pound of ground beef, a bunch of seasonings, oregano, cumin, garlic, salt, pepper. I've got some onion. I've got some green olives, which I'm gonna chop up fine. We've got some salt, of course. I'm going to start by putting a little bit of olive oil in the pan. It's completely unnecessary because it's non-stick, but it's going to help with the flavor. And I'm going to put my onions in here and my garlic, just kind of get them started before I put the ground beef in here to brown. As the ground beef continues to cook, I'm just breaking it up so that it's as fine as possible. And I'm going to add my seasonings. So I've got salt, black pepper, oregano, cumin. I feel like these are very basic Cuban spices. Most of our food includes these flavors. You really can't go wrong. This is all to your taste, which is why I'm not giving you any measurements. Just kind of, obviously not right now because the ground beef is raw. But once it's cooked, taste it and adjust the seasoning to your liking. Next, I'm adding in those olives that I chopped up with a little bit of the brine. The brine is what really gives you the flavor here. The olives add good texture. And this is a controversial take, but you add tomato paste or tomato sauce or whatever to picadillo. I like to add ketchup. It's not super uncommon. Lots of people do this, but it's not like the norm. It's what I do. It's going to add the tomato flavor, plus it's going to add a little more zing with the vinegar, etc. Moving on to the potatoes. You could either do instant or you can do regular potatoes, peel them, boil them for about 20 minutes and then mash them up. The whole thing though is that you want stiff mashed potatoes. You don't want to add, like if you're doing the dehydrated stuff, you don't want to follow the instructions on the package because it's going to make them too moist, too like soggy. You want them this consistency so that they're easy to mold, I guess. So now we're going to start putting the picadillo into the potatoes. And this is something that you can actually do in advance. Like I made the picadillo the day before I did this step. And that's probably to your benefit to do that because then the picadillo will be, cold enough or at a temperature where you can pick it up with your hands. So as you can see, I'm just grabbing like a handful of potatoes, making a little well and putting the ground beef inside, maybe like 2 tablespoons worth. And I'm covering that up with more potatoes and kind of rolling it into about, I'd say slightly bigger than a baseball size, but slightly smaller than a softball size. And once that's done, I'm gonna roll it around in some gluten-free flour. You can see the gluten-free flour bag in the background, but the bowl's in the way, so I'm not exactly showing you the process. Oh, you can kind of see me doing that there. So that's the name of the game right now, is we're rellenando las papas. We're stuffing the potatoes. That's what Papas Rellena means, by the way, stuffed potato, in case I didn't cover that earlier. So you can see I'm just grabbing a handful of meat, putting it in a handful of potatoes, covering it up with more potatoes, and then molding it into my little ball shape before rolling it in the flour. You want to do this as many times as you're able with the materials you have. I had some ground beef left over. I just ended up eating it by itself. I could have made more potatoes, but with the amount I had, I got 5 good-sized papas rellena. So once they're coated in the flour, you're going to put this in the fridge for about an hour so that it firms up before we do the next part, because the next part involves like getting them wet before you bread them, and you don't want them to fall apart. It's been an hour, and so now we're gonna move on to the next step. As you can see, I have these Ian's gluten-free panko breadcrumbs. These are actually free from all of the common allergens. I was able to find them on Amazon. You could probably find them at Whole Foods. If you have a Sprouts near you, that might be a good idea also. And you also need 1 egg. You might need more, but I was able to get away with just using the 1 egg. So I've got these 2 shallow bowls here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of las papas rellena, I'm gonna put them in the egg and roll it around, and then I'm gonna roll it around in the breadcrumbs before putting it right back on the tray. So that explains the order of things, is that I wanted to go from 1 to 2 and then back onto the tray. Because once we're done with this step, we're gonna put them back in the refrigerator for 3 hours before our last step, which is the frying. Make sure that you coat this well with the egg and then coat it well again with the breadcrumb, because you don't want any of the potato filling to seep out. It's completely common and totally okay, really, for them to pop open when they fry. Obviously, that's not ideal. You don't want that, but it does happen. It actually happened to me on the last one. So just do your best, making sure that they're completely coated with the eggs and the breadcrumbs so that we kind of minimize the chance of that happening. If you have a spare afternoon and you want to kind of do a meal prep of sorts, once you get to this point where they're coated in the breadcrumbs, you can actually freeze these and just fry them some other time. It's been 3 hours, although you could also opt to leave them in the fridge overnight. I waited the 3 hours, and now we're ready to fry. So I've got a skillet with about 3 inches of frying oil in it, and the oil is at 350 degrees. If you don't have a thermometer, Use your judgment. Whenever it starts to sizzle when you throw water in is usually a good gauge. And I've got this little spatula to make it easier because just tossing them into the hot oil, probably not safe. So I'm gonna do 2 at a time, and I'm basically frying them for 2 or 3 minutes before I flip them over and do the other side. That should be enough to give us a nice crispy coating on the outside while also warming through the potatoes and the meat that have just spent the last few hours in the refrigerator. This is exactly the color that you're looking for before you flip. Once we've achieved the desired color, I'm gonna kind of strain them out a little bit with my spatula strainer thing. I'm gonna put them onto some paper towels to continue straining or draining, you know what I mean. And we're gonna keep cooking in batches until all of them are ready. I wanted you guys to hear that crunchy texture. It's so good. So you could eat these just as they are. My favorite way to eat them is to split them open and cover them up with more ketchup. Again, not a super uncommon way. A lot of people do this, but it is my favorite way. So that's how I wanted to show it to you guys. These were so crunchy, but soft inside and then savory with a little bit of sweet. So good. Like the ultimate food, honestly. All right, friends, there you have it. Those are my papas rellena. I will definitely be making these again. They were really easy. Like I had been putting this off because I was so intimidated by the whole like idea of the process of it. I don't really see people making these at home all the time, you know, like typically if you make them at home, it's because you bought them frozen and all you're gonna do is fry them. Or like I mentioned earlier, you just go down the street to La Ventanita and you buy some. But although the process took a while because you have to keep putting it in the fridge to like let it firm up and whatnot, the actual hands-on time was not very long at all. And it was super easy. So I think I will be making these again, especially because it does seem pretty impressive, the final product. They turned out super crunchy. The texture was amazing. The filling, just everything was so good. You can't go wrong putting these things together. Even the next day, like this isn't the sort of thing that you really should, I guess, traditionally keep for leftovers because it's something deep fried and you don't expect the texture to hold up. But the next day I did have 1.5 left over. So I just sliced open that whole one, put some ketchup on it, and like just cold like that out of the fridge. I had them for breakfast and they were really good. So if you decide to make this yourself, I would love to hear how it turns out for you. Even if you wanted to make them like the regular gluten way. Like I said earlier, it's just a direct switch out of ingredients. So you would use regular flour and regular breadcrumbs instead of the gluten-free stuff. But all the same, if you decide to make it, come on back and let me know how it worked out for you. If there is a particular Cuban food that you'd like to see me make for next month, let me know in the comments too, and I'll do my best to bring you that recipe. And if not, I have a few things going on anyways in my head that I would like to show you guys, so I'll definitely have another one up in the next few weeks. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope that you will please give it a big thumbs up. I'd also love it if you would subscribe and click that notification bell because I post at least 3 times a week and I wouldn't want you to miss a minute. Thanks so much again for watching. Bye.